So what I want to do on this video is basically change these bearings on the Tech 4. So on this lever right here, I'll show you the bearings, and then so that's them there. On this particular lever, when I bought it, one of the bearings at the bottom was missing, and I've replaced that on there, and that's got rid of the kind of wibbliness. It was kind of wibbling a lot, and it's essentially just repaired it to what it should have been. But I'm guessing that in the future these bearings will wear out, so I just wanted to do a video on that, how you can kind of punch them out and press new ones in. So far there's not really any special tools needed. This is probably the only kind of, can't even really call it a specialist tool that you'll need. It's essentially just a very small Allen key bolt there with a little nut on the end. I think the nut's at 7mm, but the internal diameter of the bearing is 4, so anything smaller than that is going to work, I'd guess. And yeah, we just use that as a little kind of mini press to press the bearings back in. So yeah, let's get on with that. So the bolt underneath is a 6mm, just a standard hex normal bolt there, and the top bit is 2.5. Is that the right one? Yeah, so it's a 2.5mm. So I'm just going to undo that. One of the things with this pivot, sometimes it's best to push from the bottom with the nut. Sometimes you might find that that pivot gets stuck there, but if you push with the nut still threaded onto the pivot and kind of give the lever a little bit of a wiggle, you can see that it's protruded a little bit, and then just undo that nut and take that off eventually anyway. There we go. And then you should be able to just pull that through. Just keep in mind that your lever might fling off because it's spring loaded under there. And also you can kind of just wiggle that lever up and down, back and forth, and it should help release that pivot if it ever gets stuck. So there you go, there's your pivot and your bolt. Your lever comes off. And now what we can see is the bearings are exposed. So the bottom one is the one that I've replaced already. You can see it's sitting nice and flush. So I know that the bottom one, it doesn't come out through the bottom. So you have to push from the bottom, and that will push the bearing into this area. As for the top one, from looking at it, I'm guessing that you have to push from the inside. I'm not actually too sure. So yeah, we're just going to get along with that and see how we get on with it. Yes, I've done a few tests removing this lower bearing. So what I've come up with is got a longer bolt this time. So the old original bolt that we was going to run with is about double the length. This one's better for getting the bearing in. This one's better for getting the bearing out. So if we actually thread that through there, you should be able to see on that back edge that the actual head of the bolt, if I take that, it's smaller than this overall hole. So that if there was no bearing in there, that bolt would slip straight through. Then what we're going to do, we're going to grab this, which is like a plastic washer, because we don't want to damage the paintwork. And then we're going to put a little metal washer behind there, just so that the plastic washer can't slip over the nut. And then we're just going to thread that on here. Would be good if I could get both the bearings out at the same time, but I don't think it's going to work like that. And I'm looking at this top bearing, it kind of looks like it's not really bothered. You can push it or pull it. There's no like flange or anything there that I can see that would be holding it in place. But anyway, so we're going to tighten this. If I can get a ratchet on there, it'd be a bit easier. As for like the sizes and all that, like I said, as long as your bolt goes through the two holes, what's on the end of it, if it's a Torx, an Allen key, and what size it is and what size your nut is, that's kind of determined by the hardware that you have. Let me use this and then I can turn that. So if you're looking at this system, we're going to tighten this. You can probably see a bit of a risk here where we might actually bring these two bits of metal closer together, which would result in this kind of one of these snapping. I have done one dry run with this and it was totally fine, but yeah, that's something for you to think about. You're going to need to kind of have some sort of mechanical feeling that if you're tightening something too much, that you just need to give up with it. and look for another kind of idea. So yeah, we're just going to pop that onto there. And we're going to tighten that, and hopefully, if I move some of the crap out of the way, we'll be able to see the bearing slide out. Or we might be able to see the first casualty of a Tech 4 lever that snaps in half. So there we go. And there's your bearing. You just got to undo that completely. And there's your bottom bearing removed. So now we're just going to get onto the top one. With the bottom one it seems a bit different because the hole on the back end is not smaller, but it has like a lip. You might not be able to see just in there. So it stops the bearing from dropping out. So yeah, we'll get onto this top one and I'll do a few dry runs and see what I can come up with for that one. So yeah, for the top bearing we've just done the same thing because I'm making the assumption that this bearing can come out either way. So yeah, what we've done, washer, just to block up the big hole there, and we're just going to tighten it a little bit and see if we can push, pull, whatever you want to call it, this top bearing out a little bit. Oh, that one's a bit clicky and grainy. But that's coming out a lot easier than the bearings that I've bought. So that was, probably looked like it's pre-rehearsed, but that was the first time I've done that one. It come out very easily. Not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, considering people are going to be riding over rocky terrain and whatnot, but I'd imagine it will stay in there. Should be alright. So yeah, let's just undo this. Get that nut's come off now. There we go. And as you can see in there, there's no lip or anything like that. So if you wanted to, or if you had like a good punch, you could knock. I did try and use a punch, but potentially if you got the right sized one, you could knock that bearing, top bearing out. Either way, whatever way you want to do it. So yeah, now I will get on to putting the bearings back in. But first I'm going to run through them actually and just show you them up close and give you the numbers, so that if you need to buy any, you can. So originally with this lever, it should have had two bearings in it, but one of them was missing. This is the original. This is an Enduro bearing. Hope tend to use Enduro stuff. They do sometimes change these little black rubber seals, and they'll have like Hope on them. And some people think that Hope make the bearings. As far as I'm aware, Enduro make all the bearings that Hope use. So yeah, this is an Enduro one. These are the ones I bought. They're unbranded, generic, probably just like chromium balls inside. Whereas I would hope this one would be like stainless. If this was my brake, it's something that you're going to use for a long time, then it's probably worth investing in a higher quality bearing than the ones I've bought. A lot of my stuff I just kind of repair it and get it out there. So yeah, each lever you're going to need two bearings. And if you can't find a 684 RS, it might be that the person that's selling them has listed them with their kind of dimensions on there. So we're going to take this one, and then you can see on the camera that's a 9. The width should be roughly a 4. There we go, we've got 3.98, and then internally they should be a 4 as well. So there we go, we've got a 3.84. So if you look for a 4 times 9 times 4, you should find a 684 RS. It's the same thing basically. So yeah, that's the bearings. What we're going to do now is press them back into the lever and then put it all back together. Yeah, not going to lie, for this bit, being a bit of a pain in the ass. I've probably tried it 3 or 4 times. Once I was successful. Second time the bearing went in wonky. And then the other 2 times the bolt was like too short. And I struggled to get the thread on it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to drop the bearing into the bottom area, because I want to start with the bottom bearing first. If this bearing starts wonky, the likelihood is that it's just going to continue to be pressed in wonky, and that will just get stuck on one of the sides and it just won't go down any further. So we're going to grab a little nylon washer there, and we've gone for a longer bolt this time just to make life a little bit easier. So that's the setup on that side. So far so good. And then we will put that, is that the right way? No, we want a nylon washer, or whatever it is, plastic one. And there are other washers that you can get, but I don't have any. They're normally see-through, and sometimes they put them behind the bolts on motorcycle fairings. And I would prefer those ones, where these ones get crushed quite badly. So once you've used them a few times, they're pretty much done for. So that's roughly the setup. I am hoping that Hope developed some sort of little tool for this. They must have something in their workshop when they installed it. Maybe a little mini press or something would be pretty cool. But yeah, just try and get things nice and straight. And we're just going to tighten that nice and slow. So far so good. I'm going to loosen that from there. Looks alright, there's no bits sticking out or anything like that. I guess that's probably a good thing with the plastic, just not going to damage the bearing as well. The only bad thing now with the long bolt is that you have a lot of thread to undo. Let's undo that. That goes down there, that can go there. Get rid of that, and there's your first bearing in there. Just make sure it's nice and flush and not sticking out anywhere. That's what that looks like from underneath. And then we're going to go on to the top bearing, which I have yet to attempt. So yeah, I'll cut to that now. The top one, we're going to stick to a similar theme. I have a longer bolt this time, so the bolt size is getting a bit bigger. We're going to do the same thing with the metal washer and the plastic washer. We're just going to slide that in from the bottom, and then the idea is that the bearing will go on there. We'll tighten that and it should push the bearing down. So that's going to sit there. We're going to go for plastic again, and then hopefully we'll have enough thread. Kind of running out of bolt at this stage. Oh, it's going to be close. Probably need a socket on there so I can lean on it, or maybe try and push the bearing down a little bit. There we go, that might be enough, fingers crossed. There we go, that's holding on there. So that's a setup. You might look at this and something quite obvious. If this bearing doesn't go in straight and you keep applying pressure, potentially you could snap this, because what's going to happen is that bolt's going to get tighter and tighter and want to bring this together. So it's very important that you kind of just make sure that the bearing's moving. This kind of washer isn't great because it's touching the body, so that might end up putting a little mark on there. Hopefully not. But yeah, I think that's going to be an issue. I think we're just going to have to run metal on there. Otherwise that nylon is probably going to snag and it might end up moving the bolt over a little bit so that we can't get the bearing in central. So yeah, I'm just going to run the metal washer. Kind of hard to see how straight it is. Looks like it's a little bit. I'm going to try that and just go slowly with it. And do the same thing, just make sure you can see the bearing moving. Feels good? Yep, that's it. Once that part of the bearing has disappeared. I don't really want to press the washer into there as well, because it might be a struggle to get it out. I'm going to say about there. Just having a little look underneath as well, looks nice and flush. Remove our washer. Yeah, looks... I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet, but it looks perfect. It's exactly where it wants to go. So yeah, we just got to get our lever blade and our pivot and put that back together, and then we should have a nice brake, one that doesn't click anymore, nice smooth lever. So yeah, we're just going to chuck this on, get our pivot ready. together a bit. Sometimes you might have to just push the piston in. So it's almost like the brake's being applied. So just be careful what's on the other end. If you've got a caliper or anything, pistons might pop out. So we're in a little bit of the way. I'm just going to wiggle that. And then get the little tiny nut. So this bit's important because you have to kind of, we've put the nut on a little bit. If we were to tighten that and part of the nut isn't going into the bearing, that could cause a problem. So what I tend to like to do is try and push that through. It just seems easier to try and line it up this end. There we go. So I've pushed that through. On the pivot, the bit that sits inside the bearing, the shaft is a lot longer. So there's less chance that you're going to miss it or damage it. So what we're going to do is grab a bit smaller version of that. I think it's a 2.5. This one. Yeah, that's the one. And what is this bottom one? Is it a 7? No, it's a 6 mil. There we go. So we're just going to put that onto there, and we shall tighten this top. But this is quite a nice system that they've done. It kind of just stops turning. But you really have to put a lot of pressure in there to get it to do up anymore. Check my caliper. Don't want the pistons to pop out. Right. So there's your lever, and we've got rid of that kind of swayiness. So yeah, you can also see that as you turn that, the whole bolt moves as well. That's something I didn't notice before. But yeah, there you go, there's your Tech 4 bearing replacement. Just a couple of bolts and a couple of washers.